Near trade-heavy regions, local authorities regulated river traffic. This included collecting tolls, resolving disputes, and ensuring safe passage. In Nubia, these roles were often handled at the community level rather than by distant rulers. In other words, this is where order lives quietly. A dim light flickers ahead. Not a village, just a single lamp near the waterline. The boat slows. A figure stands near the bank, barely moving. A riverkeeper from another section. A counterpart. There's no greeting shouted across the water. Just a raised hand. A nod. A few quiet words exchanged as the boats draw close. Hermack leans in, speaking softly. Names. Directions. A question about water levels farther south. The answer comes just as softly. You realize this is how information travels. Not in grand announcements, but in murmured updates passed hand to hand, night to night. A quirky tidbit floats into your awareness. Some Nile communities used informal night councils, brief exchanges between watchers, to decide everything from fishing access to emergency responses. No written records, just memory and trust. Historians still argue how often these informal systems conflicted with official royal authority, especially during periods of empire. Tonight, it feels like the river listens to these men more than to any distant throne. A small bundle changes hands. You don't see what's inside, maybe grain, maybe dried fish, maybe nothing important at all. It's the gesture that matters. A light joke slips out of you, whispered. So, receipts? Hermack gives you a look. One eyebrow rises. You immediately regret the joke. Then he smiles. Just a little. The boats separate. The lone watcher fades back into the darkness, lamp dimming until it disappears entirely. As you drift on, you feel the weight of the system around you. Not heavy, reassuring. Rules that don't need to be spoken loudly. Authority that doesn't need uniforms. The Nile flows through it all, indifferent but accommodating. And you float within this quiet order, feeling oddly safe in its simplicity. The river grows quieter again, as if it has finished its official business and returned to something more personal. The posts and lamps thin out, replaced by open water and long, shadowed banks. The boat's wake spreads gently behind you, then vanishes, leaving the surface smooth once more. Someone near the bow reaches into a small pouch and pulls out a cord with a few objects tied along it. Tiny charms, worn smooth by years of handling. They hang there quietly, tapping against each other with the boat's motion. Hermack notices your curiosity and explains, softly, that they're for protection. Not dramatic protection. Nothing loud or flashy. Just small reminders that the river has moods, and it helps to be on good terms with them. A mainstream historical fact fits naturally here. Belief systems along the Nile blended practical life with spiritual practice. In Nubia, as in Egypt, people carried amulets, spoke quiet prayers, and performed small rituals for safety, especially when dealing with dangerous or unpredictable environments like the river at night. One of the charms is shaped like a simple knot. Another is a small carved animal, hard to tell which. A third looks like nothing at all unless you know what you're looking for. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some river workers believed certain knots, when tied in specific ways, could bind bad luck or confuse harmful spirits. Others thought spoken words mattered more than objects. Many probably believed both just to be safe. Historians still argue whether these practices were deeply religious or more psychological. Ways to build confidence and calm in risky situations. Sitting here under the stars, the distinction feels unimportant. The charms sway gently as the boat moves on. Someone murmurs a brief phrase under their breath. Not loud enough to be a chant. Not formal enough to be a prayer. Just a habit. Comfort. You find yourself copying it. Not the words, but the intention. A quiet moment of acknowledgement that you're small. The river is big, and you'd like to keep things friendly. A light joke slips into your mind. You whisper, so, do the charms work better if you really believe? Hermack considers this for a moment, then shrugs. They work better if you're careful, he says. Fair. The night deepens. The stars overhead shift again, marking another slow passage of time. The drum remains silent now, its work done for this stretch of the watch. You feel the calm settling heavier, like a second cloak over your shoulders. Your breathing slows. The river's sound becomes background, comforting and constant. The boat glides on, carrying you through belief, habit, and quiet reassurance. Another layer of the night watch woven seamlessly into the flow. The river feels older here, not in a dramatic way, no sudden ruins rising from the water, no grand monuments announcing themselves, but in a quiet, accumulated sense, like a path worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The banks stretch long and low, and the land beyond them feels settled, shaped by hands that are no longer remembered by name. Hermack gestures toward the shoreline where faint outlines break the darkness. Low walls, collapsed edges, shapes that don't quite belong to nature anymore. Old structures, not abandoned recently, abandoned thoroughly. A mainstream historical fact slides gently into place. Nubia was home to powerful kingdoms long before and after Egypt's peak periods, including Kerma, Napata, and Meroe. Capitals shifted over time as political and environmental conditions changed, leaving behind settlements that slowly returned to the earth. You drift past one of these forgotten places now. In daylight, you might see pottery shards, foundation stones, traces of roads. At night, you see only silhouettes and shadows, half reclaimed by sand and plants. The riverkeepers don't treat the site with ceremony. They don't stop. They don't stare. They've passed it many times. To them, it's just part of the river's memory. But you feel something stir anyway, a quiet awareness of continuity. Empires rise. Empires fade. The night watch remains. A quirky tidbit surfaces as you glide by. Some Nubian ruins were reused again and again across centuries. Stones repurposed, walls rebuilt, sites adapted to new needs. What looks abandoned might once have lived several different lives. Historians still argue how much continuity existed between these phases, whether later communities saw themselves as inheritors of earlier cultures or simply practical users of available materials. The boat moves on, indifferent to those debates. The stars overhead look the same as they did hours ago, and yet not the same at all. Their positions have shifted just enough to remind you that time is passing, even when nothing seems to change. You feel a strange comfort in that. One of the riverkeepers begins to speak quietly, sharing a story, not a legend, but a memory passed down. His grandfather worked this same stretch of river. His grandfather's grandfather did too. Names blur. Places remain. You realize the night watch isn't just about protecting the present. It's about maintaining a thread that stretches backward, connecting countless nights like this one. A light joke drifts from you, barely above a breath. So, job security? The man smiles, tired and amused. As long as river flows, he replies. The Nile flows. The boat glides forward, carrying you through the overlapping shadows of past and present. And you feel yourself becoming part of that long, unbroken watch, if only for a night. The night feels thinner now, stretched out and worn smooth by passing hours. The air cools just a little more, and the river carries a different scent. Less warm mud, more clean water, faintly metallic, like stone after rain. You sense it before anyone says a word. This is flood country. Hermack points toward the far bank, where the land flattens and disappears into darkness. In the flood season, he explains softly, this place becomes water. Fields vanish. Paths dissolve. The river spreads wide, slow and unstoppable, turning familiar ground into a shallow, shifting lake. A mainstream historical fact fits easily here. The annual Nile flood was the foundation of life in Nubia and Egypt, depositing fertile silt that made agriculture possible. Calendars, planting cycles, and even religious festivals were organized around its rise and fall. You imagine this calm stretch transformed, water creeping outward night by night, swallowing markers, fences, memories. The riverkeepers know these changes intimately. They remember where the river went last year, and the year before that, and the year before that. Memory is a tool here too. One of the men gestures with his pole, tracing an invisible line in the air. That's where the water reached once, he says. Another riverkeeper shakes his head slightly and traces a different line. Higher. a quiet disagreement. Historians still argue about how predictable the Nile flood really was in ancient times, whether it followed a reliable rhythm or fluctuated enough to cause regular hardship. Standing here, listening to these men compare remembered waterlines, you sense the truth is somewhere in between. The debate fades without resolution. It doesn't need one. Both memories matter. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Some communities kept informal flood records not on papyrus, but in stories, naming years after particularly high or low floods, using memory as archive. The year the water touched the old fig tree. The year the boats reached the shrine. You drift onward, the boat gliding over water that looks peaceful now but carries the weight of future change. The river is never finished. It's always becoming something else. A light joke slips from you, whispered. So, when it floods, do you get overtime? Hermack chuckles softly. River never pays, he says. The stars overhead begin to pale, just barely, the darkest blue softening at the edges. It's not dawn yet, but it's closer than it was. You feel it in your body, a gentle heaviness, pleasant fatigue. The river continues flowing, remembering floods past and preparing for floods to come, while you float quietly within its long memory. The river's surface begins to change in subtle ways. It's not light yet, not even close, but the blackness softens, loosening into deep blue. The stars still shine, though some seem less sharp now, as if they're slowly exhaling before sleep. Dawn is on its way. Hermack notices it immediately. He doesn't announce it. He just shifts his posture, rolling his shoulders once, quietly preparing. The others follow, small movements rippling through the boat. The night watch is nearing its end, and that brings a different kind of focus. This is the handover hour. The boat angles toward the bank where a familiar docking place waits. The water here is shallow and calm, sheltered from the current by a gentle curve in the shoreline. The pole taps bottom, sand, then mud, confirming what memory already knows. A mainstream historical fact settles into the moment. River-based labor along the Nile often ran in overlapping shifts, especially during busy seasons. Night watchers would brief early morning workers, fishermen, ferrymen, farmers, passing along observations about water levels, hazards, or unusual activity. Information flows forward, just like the river. A second boat waits near the shore, its outline barely visible. A new set of riverkeepers stands beside it, stretching, rubbing sleep from their eyes, murmuring greetings that sound more like exhalations than words. No ceremony, no speeches, just continuity. Hermack steps onto the bank and speaks quietly with the incoming watchers. He gestures upstream, then downstream, tracing routes with his hand. He mentions the hippo, the crocodile, the trade boat that passed earlier, the waterline debate. You listen, realizing how much of the night lives on in these short exchanges. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Some communities believed that failing to properly pass on night watch knowledge invited misfortune, not because spirits would punish you, but because ignorance is dangerous. Memory, shared correctly, was considered a form of protection. Historians still argue how formal these handovers were, but the care taken here suggests they mattered deeply. A light joke escapes you softly. So, clock out time? Hermack smiles, tired but content. River clocks us, he says. The boat is secured. The lamp is extinguished. Darkness begins to loosen its grip. You step onto the bank, legs stiff, body heavy with that pleasant exhaustion that follows quiet vigilance. The river flows beside you, unchanged, unconcerned. The night watch is ending, but the river never does. You linger by the water as the others finish their quiet exchanges, and the sky continues its slow transformation. The deep blue thins further, softening toward a pale gray along the horizon. The stars don't vanish all at once. They fade reluctantly, one by one, like tired eyes finally closing. The Nile looks different now. Less mysterious, maybe, but no less powerful. Its surface reflects the changing sky, catching early hints of color. The river smells cooler, cleaner, as if it's been washed by the night. You feel the full weight of the hours settle into your body. Not exhaustion exactly, more like completion. A mainstream historical fact rests gently here. Dawn marked an important transition along the Nile. Night duties ended, day labor began, and the rhythm of river life shifted seamlessly. Fishing nets were cast, ferries launched, fields checked, markets prepared. All built on the quiet work done while others slept. Hermack stands beside you for a moment, both of you looking out over the water. He doesn't say much. He doesn't need to. The river speaks well enough for both of you. You think back on the night. The stars, the animals, the villages asleep, the trade boats gliding past like whispers. None of it felt rushed. None of it needed explanation. A quirky tidbit floats up one last time. Some Nile communities believed that watching the river at dawn helped reset the mind after night work, easing the transition back into ordinary life. Just standing, breathing, letting the river move on without you. Historians still argue whether such practices were intentional or simply convenient habits, but standing here now, it feels intentional enough. A light joke slips from you, quiet and fond. So, same time tomorrow? Hermack smiles just slightly. River decides, he repeats. The day crew moves off toward their tasks. The night watchers disperse, blending back into village life. No applause, no recognition, just rest. And now, as promised, the night loosens its grip completely, and it's time to let everything slow down even further. The river keeps flowing beside you, wide and unhurried, carrying with it the memory of stars and lamps and quiet footsteps along the bank. The air is gentle now, cool against your skin, and the sounds of morning arrive softly. Distant voices, the call of a bird, the faint creak of wood beginning another day. You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to do anything. Just let the river move. Your breathing slows, matching the water's pace. In and out. The Nile doesn't rush, and neither do you. The night's images fade gently. The hippo's breath, the drum's rhythm, the glow of oil lamps reflected in dark water, each one drifting away like ripples smoothing out. You're safe here, watched over, held in a rhythm older than memory, steady and calm. The river flows on and you can let go. Sleep comes easily now, carried on water and quiet and the soft promise that someone, somewhere, is always keeping watch.